joins us. She's a board member of CURE. CURE's mission is to find a cure to epilepsy. Nothing else will be acceptable at this point. We're going to find a cure. We just hit our 20 years, a little history. 20 years ago, Susan Axelrod and a couple of mothers were dealing with the fact that there were no answers. And they were tired and they were frustrated, and they said, okay, that's it. We have other organizations that are offering us advocacy and education. We need to find a cure. So they started CURE. 20 years later, we've raised over $60 million for research. We are funding over 220 grant researchers, and we're in 15 countries. So we've come a long way. The problem is we don't have a cure yet. So we have some more work to do. So, without further ado, this is Kelly Cervantes and her lovely family. You guys can wave. And the way we're going to do this is we've set up a couple of questions, and it's more, if you have questions too, raise your hand. Ask. We want this to be intimate and organic so that you feel like you're getting everything you need out of this. So, Kelly, can you tell us a little bit how you ended up with the epilepsy story attached to you and your family?
Of course. So my daughter Adelaide she had her first seizure at 7 months, and then she was diagnosed with infantile spasms at 9 months old. From birth, we knew that something wasn't really quite right. She wasn't progressing the way that she should. She wasn't meeting those milestones. So we had got in to see a neurologist. Actually, her pediatric appointment at her 2-month checkup, the pediatrician was like, hey, you should probably try and see a neurologist. Took us 2 months to get an appointment, so now she's 4 months old, and still not meeting those milestones, still not great head control, she's not trying to roll over, she's not sitting up, and we started a battery of tests. 7 months, she has that first seizure. EEG shows epilepsy. I didn't know this word, I didn't know anything about it. Just like so many other people who are confronted with this, and all they know is what you see in the movies or on a TV show, someone having a tonic-clonic, grandma on the floor. And so this was new to us. In my mind, I was like, oh, this is just something we really have to deal with, the hypotonia, the low muscle tones. That's what we really have to deal with. The seizure thing, like we'll just get that under control. We'll just get those seizures taken care of, and then we'll go back to dealing with these other developmental issues. Her first drug, she actually didn't have another seizure for 2 months. At the time when Adelaide was diagnosed, at that 7-month point, my husband happened to be in auditions for this small production on Broadway called Hamilton. And he left Adelaide and I in the hospital while she was about being taken away for a lumbar puncture. And he left us to go audition his 3rd audition for Hamilton. How he made it through that audition, I don't know. He's amazing. But something worked out because he got the job. And so the same week that we find out that Adelaide is diagnosed with epilepsy, we also find out that we are moving to Chicago. And so started a whirlwind 3 months of me trying to move our family to Chicago while also understanding this incredibly complex medical condition that my daughter had now been diagnosed with. She was actually, after that first seizure, she was actually doing pretty well. And then 9 months, I'm actually in Chicago trying to find us an apartment, a school for my son. And I get a call from Miguel one morning while I'm out there, and he says, she's not acting right. Something's not quite right. She keeps doing these weird head drops. And we decide that he should take her to the emergency room right away. He takes her in, and that night, I get a call from Miguel, the pediatrician, saying she has infantile spasms. And it's a devastating diagnosis.
Did you know at that time what that meant?
Infantile spasms had been, the word had been thrown around a couple times peripherally,
okay.
But not like, but more in the way of like, oh, that's a really bad one. You don't want it to be that. She doesn't have that, but you don't want it to be that. And so then to get that diagnosis of this thing, this bad one that you didn't want, and now all of a sudden, that is what is being laid at your feet. Along with the words immediately afterwards that there is no cure. I could not get on a plane immediately to come back home because I had to find a home for our family and a school for my son. And so 36 hours later, after finding an apartment very quickly and a school even faster, I took a cab directly from Newark Airport to the hospital where my daughter was at, and she was a shadow of the little girl that I had left behind. The little girl I left behind was, she smiled, she engaged with us, she was responsive. The child that I saw in the hospital, they were giving her a shot of ACTH, steroid, the frontline IS treatment. She didn't respond. She didn't cry, but they were giving her a shot. She didn't acknowledge that I was there. And that hit me, that this was not some seizure thing. We just needed to get rid of the seizure so that we could deal with everything else. This was the fight. This was the battle that we were going to have. But we still had so much hope.
Sure.
We were like, okay, the ACTH is going to work. The ACTH didn't work. Sabril, vigabatrin, that's going to work. That didn't work. Prednisone is going to work. That didn't work. And you start to walk down the path, and then you start to hear the doctors saying intractable epilepsy. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that she's not responding to the drugs. So every drug that we try from here on out has a less than 2% chance of working. And you're like, well, crap.
That just stinks.
How is this the case? And you start to realize my immediate, thank goodness that we're getting this diagnosis in the age of social media, and so I'm jumping on Facebook and all of these different things, and Miguel's like, well, I found this one, and I found this one, and we're like reading through, trying to educate ourselves as much as possible through
real life.
Yes.
It's real life. It's happening as you're going along.
And I'm grateful for those groups, but you realize how many people are affected by this and how few answers there are. You're like, how is this the case? You see 1 in 26, you see, millions of people, and you're like, I just don't get it. Now, interestingly, I had heard of Cure before.
That was going to be my segue question.
Yes, jumping on your segue. So prior to Adelaide's diagnosis and Miguel booking Hamilton and our entire lives flipping upside down, I was an event planner, sales person for Tom Colicchio's restaurant group in New York, where we lived. And I had just coincidentally, very randomly, kismetly, had hosted, planned, sold Cure's New York benefit 2 years before.
I never knew
You
this.
didn't know this?
I did not know this.
So I was familiar with the organization. Once again, knew nothing about epilepsy, nothing about seizures, but I was like, oh, these people are really cool, they're really nice. I knew they lived in Chicago. So once I came up for air, once we got Adelaide's diagnosis, specifically IS, specifically that we were moving to Chicago with Hamilton, I was like, oh, right, Cure. So I'm like digging through my contacts, trying to find someone at Cure to reach out to be like, hi, my daughter, I know a couple of, I don't know who still works for the organization, but I know you, I did something with you, I need help, I'm moving to Chicago where you're headquartered and my daughter has epilepsy. And we were welcomed into that office with open arms, just so, Cure introduced us to other families. We moved to Chicago September 10th. September 16th, Adelaide was rushed to the hospital by ambulance because her oxygen was low. She ended up having pneumonia. She needed a feeding tube, G-tube. We started going down that road. And during that admission, Susan Axelrod, the founder of Cure, who happened to live across the street from the hospital where my daughter was, came and visited me in the hospital. And I was like, if this woman can take time out of her day to come and visit me in the hospital, then I need to know more about what they're doing.
I think you just defined and clearly demonstrated the first step of advocating for your child is you're desperate, you need to find something out, you're going to do whatever it takes, but you just start emailing. You just start emailing, calling, you reach out to as many people and ask those questions. So I think that was probably one of your first steps.
Yeah, so in terms of sort of getting into the advocacy piece for it. I sort of break it down. I see 5 different ways that we need to be advocates for our children, for our spouses, for ourselves, however it is. Advocacy in and of itself is such a broad term. So I think it's helpful if we can break it down a little bit. So I see sort of 5 different areas where we can be the best advocates, both for those affected and for the disease itself. The first way, the most glaringly obvious way to me that we need to be advocates is within the medical community. I remember a dear friend of mine sent me an email after Adelaide had gotten her diagnosis, and she was like, no one knows your daughter better than you. You have to trust your gut and your instincts. And the doctors may come to you and say that you are supposed to do X, Y, and Z, but that may not feel right to you. So you ask why. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to get a second opinion. And it is our responsibility to make sure that we are holding all of the medical professionals accountable, A, for their decisions or for their suggestions or for their treatments. That is within our right to say no, or to say wait, or to ask those questions, both to educate ourselves and to educate them, because they're learning from us. This is a two-way street. No one knows the ins and outs of epilepsy. There is no textbook that says, this is why this is happening, this is the treatment that's gonna work. So we're learning from each other. And if you ever were, I would say, off the record, if you were to ever find a neurologist who thinks that they have all the answers, that is not the doctor, because they don't. The best doctors are going to admit that they don't have the answers, and that they don't necessarily know what's going on, and that they're going to try this, but it may or may not work. And they should have hope, they should have sense of urgency, but there are no always and nevers when it comes to seizures and when it comes to epilepsy, and any doctor that tries to tell you otherwise is not being truthful with you.
We have a day of science. Kara hosted a day of science, and this weekend in Miami, one of the physicians, there was a mother-son on the panel, 2 physicians. Nobody in the crowd knew that they were related. And so we asked this question, what's the most important thing as a physician in treating? And the mother said, listen to the mothers. They know. Listen to the mothers. As a physician, that's the best advice I can give. And the son then said, well, she can say that, she's my mother. And
it's a tough thing, because when Adelaide was diagnosed, I was like, well, but how do I know her best? I don't feel like I know this child anymore. She's completely changed. How can that be me? And it took time. And now I do know. And I know the ins and outs. Adelaide was taken, we had to take her into the ER last week, and we were in the process of transferring her from the ED to the PICU. And she has cluster seizures. So they don't last very long, but they can cluster for, anywhere from just, 2 or 3 minutes to 20 minutes, or longer, as the case was last Monday. And the emergency room nurse, Adelaide, is seizing, and she says, okay, we're ready to move you up to the PICU. And I said, my daughter's having seizures right now. We're gonna wait until she hasn't had a seizure in 5 or 10 minutes before you want to move her anywhere. And Adelaide, she was like, okay, yeah, well, she was not my favorite nurse.
She doesn't need
she stood there and waited, and just stood there, and I was like, okay, so Adelaide's emergency med is Diastat. Can you please go get some Diastat in case we need it? She went and got it. But I had to probe her, and you're gonna have great nurses and great doctors, but you're also gonna have not great ones, and you have to have the courage and the strength to speak up and say, no, you're doing that wrong. No, that's not the case.
They're not your friends.
Yes, I need that. So we transport her up to the PICU, and Adelaide starts to have a seizure while we're trying to transfer her from the emergency room transport bed into the PICU bed. And the nurse reaches down and holds Adelaide's arm down in the bed while she is seizing. I yelled at her so loud, I would get your hand off my daughter. Seizure 101, you do not hold down someone who was seizing. And she snapped back and was shocked, and I would have asked her to leave the room, except she was pinned between the wall and the bed, and I couldn't actually do that. But not everyone knows these things, and so it's up to us to educate them, and you have to hope that they all know, but they don't. And then the next day, once everything was much calmer, I called patient relations and let them know that maybe there was a nurse or two in their emergency department who needed to have proper seizure training. And I alerted Adelaide's doctor, who is the head of the Rush Pediatric Epilepsy, blah, 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 that maybe he needs to go. And he's like, yeah, that's on my radar. We need to go down and do some,
So she's an advocate
some
for
further
epilepsy
training.
in general. Great.
But so that first piece, that first sort of pillar of advocacy, it has to start within the medical community. It has to start with your doctors. It has to start with your nurses. You hope against hope that they have your child, your sibling, your spouse, your loved one. You hope that they have, and they should, their best interest at heart. But there is no guarantee that they do, or that they're not going to misstep. And so it is a heavy responsibility, and it is a heavy burden, and it sucks like the rest of everything. But it's up to us to make sure that they're being well taken care of, and to answer those questions, and to ask the questions of the medical team who's providing that, and not be afraid to get a second opinion, not be afraid to switch doctors.
So not everybody is as assertive as Kelly is, and that's okay. We're all different. So one of my suggestions, for me, I'm a people pleaser to the point where I have so many animals living in my home because I didn't know how to say no, and now I, just overrun a zoo. And my husband's like, "How did this happen?" And I was like, "You knew this when you married me." He's like, but so I've had to practice saying no, and I've had to practice myself as how to be assertive and to say those things. No, you will not do that. So I know everybody in here is not the same. So make that something where you're at home and where you're surrounded by people, and practice saying no, and practice saying, this is what you're going to do for my child. This is your child. This is your spouse. This is your body. So these are really important things for you to, I think this is the best advice of the whole thing you're going to talk about today.
So sort of the next pillar of advocacy, and this seems very appropriate since we have an election day tomorrow, but it is advocating for our loved ones as U.S. citizens, as our representatives are being elected, being very aware of different issues that could be coming up, or what those representatives stand for. And I'm certainly not going to be up here telling you who to vote or what color to vote for, or any of that. It is just educating yourself and knowing what issues there are. For me, our insurance probably pays over $1 million a year for Adelaide's care, because of the amount of time that we spend in the hospital, because of the meds that she is on. There is absolutely thanks be to Hamilton and Lin-Manuel Miranda, we are doing okay financially. But A, that's not the case for everyone, and B, even though we are doing okay, there is absolutely no way we could afford out-of-pocket Adelaide's expenses. So for us, making sure that pre-existing conditions stay in the health insurance world as something that someone cannot be denied is imperative. I don't know how we function. How do we afford food on the table? How do I afford anything for my son if everything has to go toward her medical care, which already incurs tons of expenses in terms of specialty nursing care, or babysitters, or all of the other parking at the hospital, all of the things that insurance doesn't pay for that are still expenses. These are things that we need to be aware of, and you have to know who you're voting for, what they stand for, what things are going on. I would even go a step further, and if you can, meet your legislators. Let them know that these are issues for you. Are there certain buildings that are not up to ADA requirements? Are there certain programs at your school that you wish were better? Talk to your legislators. Let them know that your House of Representatives person, they have a small district. They need to know that you are there, that you have these issues. What can they do for you? How can they help advocate for you? Because that's their job. They're going to DC to represent you, and they need to know who you are and what your issues are. So get into their offices, write them letters, write them emails. Know that that is their job, and if they don't do their job, then you vote someone else in. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that we are representing and making sure that the future laws that are being passed are going to positively benefit our children tomorrow that we need to have happen today. So that's sort of my second pillar. And
Alexander Hamilton would be proud of you.
My son is like, that's you, Daddy.
Okay, next pillar.
So the next pillar, I would say, is, and this is more specifically for children, but it's going to be your IEPs, those individualized educational programs that you are setting up for your child in school. This is not something that I know a lot about personally. My daughter is so developmentally disabled that getting her into school is not in her best interest right now. She's also only 3. But we sort of, it was a decision that I had to walk because she just aged out of early intervention programs, and we had to make the decision, are we going to keep her at home or are we going to start her, because technically the public schools have to take her. So that's something to know, is that the public school has to take your child. Regardless of how disabled they are, regardless of the situation, the public schools are required to take your child and have an IEP in place for them, no matter what. And that's something that you have to request, and it's something that you work through, and the district has to be set up to help you figure that out. So, you know, my recommendation would be to try and find other parents who are in your school district who have gone through this before, who can help you, because your child spends 40 hours a week at school, if not more. I mean, it's an incredibly important, think how much you develop, how much of who you are now is because of who you were in school. You need to make sure that you are educating the teachers. Let's say your child doesn't have an IEP necessarily, but they could have a seizure at school. Make sure that their teachers know. Go in and talk to their classroom, or ask your child to talk to the class if that's, so that they know what is going on. This isn't contagious. This is something that they're dealing with, and I love you. Greg Grunberg was just saying, my son is not an epileptic. He has epilepsy. It doesn't have him. And these are messages that it's really important for us to get out into the schools. And so that is this educational piece, making sure that our children are safe in school, that they are being set up to succeed, both from an educational standpoint, from a social standpoint, that we are slapping stigma in the face, that we are making sure that never even becomes an issue, because we are getting out in front of it. And so that making sure that school environment, that IEP, that educational system is set up well, that foundation is there, is so incredibly important. I would argue almost as much as the medical advocacy, you really need to make sure that educational system is set up and safe for your child.
I'm proud of you in that one. So you have Alexander Hamilton. That's the one I love. What's your now they're starting to. What's the next one?
So the next one is
she planned these out in her head when she was taking a shower. Was
it
the shower?
It's been a month. I had all of these plans for this talk to be. I was going to have slides, and it was going to be all this thing, and then we spent 2 weeks in the ICU, and so you roll with the punches. And so at the end of the day, I am a mom first and foremost, and so that has to take precedent. But I still have all of these ideas up in my head. So the fourth pillar is community, and advocating in your community, and this can be on the smallest level. Adelaide looks like she's sleeping a lot of the time. Her eyes are closed, or mostly closed, and I can't tell you, zillionaires if I had $1 for every time someone was like, oh, she's so sleepy, she's sleeping. And I'm like, no, actually, this is her awake. This is what she looks like when she's awake. She has epilepsy. Use the word. She has epilepsy. Get that word into their brain. Get it so that they hear it, so that they're aware of it. I want people to be just as aware of epilepsy as they are of cancer. Everyone knows cancer. We can kind of understand it. Epilepsy is a little more challenging enough. I barely understand what epilepsy is. How can I expect someone? But you say the word. You get the word out there. You get the word in front of their faces. You make them listen. She has epilepsy. Oh, well, but she looks normal.
Yep.
Yep. She does. You can, so it's a moment of education. Find those moments of education in your everyday life. You have to be willing to share. You have to be willing to talk about it. And sometimes that's tricky. There is stigma around it, and I get it. It is so much easier for me, and I will own that. My daughter has no idea what's going on. She's cognitively a newborn. It is much easier for me to get out there and talk about her than it would be if I had a 16 or 17-year-old who was self-conscious. I understand that. I get that. But it is so important that we are out there talking about it. So it's those interpersonal interactions.
No, but if she was 16, I think that your daughter would think, oh, mom's talking about it so openly, it must not be something I should be ashamed of.
Yeah.
So no matter what the age is, talk about it confidently and passionately and compassionately.
Yeah.
And your child, your significant other will only feel pride to be associated with that then. Pride and
that's the
yeah,
hope.
it is what it is.
Yeah. Share those, and it's in those everyday interactions. It's on social media. I'm pretty sure that I have a handful of people who have unfriended me or unfollowed me because my entire feed at this point is all about epilepsy. And it is what it is. That is our life. We are living it every day. If you want to know what, that this is it. We live, eat, and breathe seizures and meds and hospitals and all of this. So if you want to know what's going on in our life, this is what it is. I probably take it to the other extreme, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. It's Epilepsy Awareness Month. Let's shout that from this is...
Celebrate.
Exactly. This is what it is. This is my story. Take that moment to share your story during this month. Get it out there on social media. Tell people, because they hear the word epilepsy and they don't realize that they know 4 people who have epilepsy, who are affected by it. They have no idea.
1 in 26. So think about that. 1 in 26 people have it to varying degrees, and those 26 people are many times silent. Talk about it proudly and passionately, like this.
Which is why we've got to get the word out. We have to use the word epilepsy. I can't tell you how many people, because I talk about it with everyone, including like Lyft and Uber drivers. They're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm a mom. My daughter has epilepsy. I'm on the cure board. I do it because I don't shut up about it. But they're like, oh yeah, my aunt had a seizure disorder. And I'm like, yeah, your aunt had epilepsy.
So many people say that. I know somebody who has seizures. That's called epilepsy.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, it's epilepsy. So it's getting the two to correlate. I had a phone call with a mom who just kept talking about her son's seizures, and because of the way that her son is, they identify a little more with the autistic community, and I get that, and that's where they've gotten their support. But it was so fun, it shook me to my core that she didn't feel like she had community around the seizures, around epilepsy. And I don't know if it's because they just didn't talk about that, or they didn't have people reaching out to them, or the community wasn't there for it, but that's up to us. Building it in your community, being able to be outspoken about it, being able to educate people so that they do understand, so that they do know. No one else is going to do that. We have to do that. No one gets it. Mm-hmm. No one gets how we live from EEG or med to med, or how you know exactly how long it's been since the last seizure and how long it was. No one knows any of it, but we do. And it's up to us to make them care. Because they may not be affected by epilepsy today, but they could be tomorrow. And I don't think that people realize that. I mean, look around this room. How many different types of people, how many shades of people, how many different ages of people, and we are all affected by epilepsy. Epilepsy does not give a damn who you are. It can still affect you. And people don't get that. They don't understand. They don't understand the spectrum. Yes, there are people like my daughter who are incredibly disabled, but there are also perfectly, highly functioning people who are living full and vibrant lives, who have been incredibly successful, who are inspirations to us all. The spectrum that this disorder can affect is incredible. And people need to know that too. They need to understand that yes, there are the Adelaides of the world, but there are also the Kurt Eichenwalds of the world, who are New York Times bestsellers, who have written movies that Matt Damon has starred in. Like, there is a huge spectrum here, and people need to understand that. And no one's going to make them understand it but us. So it's really up to us. It doesn't, I stress, yes, Miguel and I have a platform because of Hamilton. Thank you so much that we do have this. But you don't have to have a platform to share with your neighbor, to share with the teacher, to share at your place of worship, to share on social media. You can build your own soapbox and just educate the people around you. And that is going to help get the awareness out there. Not Miguel Cervantes, star of Hamilton. It is Jane Smith from Gary, Indiana, who is communicating with her circle, and whoever else in Orlando, Florida. Like, it is all of us.
Foundation, and they said, you know what? You were looking around in Kansas City, Missouri. They want me to say Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas. But there was nobody out there to help, so we started something. And I thought, well, that's what you're gonna have to do on a smaller scale. You don't need to start a foundation. We really don't want you to, because that's gonna cannibalize us. No, we want you to advocate. So we're gonna have a final question, and I want you all to think about this question too, because I don't know if it's ever been asked to you. So, if epilepsy was a person, what would you say to this person? I mean, in PG, there's a child in here.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a 4-letter word that begins with F that comes to mind really, really quickly.
But have you ever visualized that before?
No, I haven't. I hate you.
Right.
I hate you for taking my daughter away from me.
Yeah.
I hate you for taking her smiles away. I hate you for, taking my son's sister away. I hate you. But I love my daughter.
Yep, that's what it is.
And so, which I think is what motivated us, sort of that fifth pillar of advocacy, is fundraising. And while I am a CURE board member and I'm a representative of CURE, I am not about to, I am passionate about research. Personally, that to me is, I feel like science hasn't caught up to my daughter. We don't know why she is the way she is. We've had every genetic test under the sun, and no one can tell us what's going on. And that sucks. I need science to catch up to her. I need science to catch up for all the athletes out there, for all of the kiddos. And so that to me is why CURE made the most sense for us to partner with. But I would say, find your CURE, whether it is CURE, or a local epilepsy group in your community, or whoever it is. Find the group that speaks to you. And fundraising doesn't have to be a big, grand scale, huge gala or event. It can be something small. It can be, having a small event at the school. It could be
a bake sale.
It can be, it could be anything under the sun. Come up with, it doesn't even have to be an event. It can just be going on Facebook. It's Epilepsy Awareness Month, and say, I am doing, or for your birthday, Facebook has those birthday things. I'm raising money for Epilepsy Foundation or CURE or Danny did or whoever for my birthday this year because epilepsy has affected our lives. Or, I'm raising money for Epilepsy Awareness Month. There are so many different ways. You can just, if your hometown, does your hometown have an epilepsy awareness day in your hometown? Reach out to your mayor. I would love for this day to be Epilepsy Awareness Day, whether it's in November or maybe it's your child's birthday or whatever it is. There are tons of different ways that you can come up with to create events and fundraisers, because it is, once again, the same way that it is our community that has to get the word out about epilepsy, it's our community that has to raise the money, because we're the ones who care. So reaching out to those contacts. Maybe there's a local boutique or a store that you absolutely love and you shop in and you're friends with the owner. Maybe that owner would have a special night where you invite in a bunch of people and they donate 10% of the sales back. Or we partnered with Fairgrounds, Coffee and Tea, and they created Adelaide's Blend coffee, which is for sale at the Cure table. It's really, really good. Go buy some.
And the Fairgrounds in Chicago and
there's one in LA.
And Minneapolis.
And
right?
Minneapolis. We visited the LA one yesterday and had to get our pictures and pick up a bunch of coffee. So visit, if you are in SoCal, visit the one in LA, downtown. But so 20% of the proceeds go back to Cure, which is awesome. I was like, this is incredible. And then all of a sudden, I had someone reach out to me in one of the restaurant groups in Chicago. She, pastry chef, she was like, so I really want to help. Do you have any ideas? And I was like, well, what if you, for the month of November, create a dessert using Adelaide's Blend coffee and put that on your menu? She got it approved in 4 of the restaurants in the restaurant group to have this dessert made with Adelaide's Blend. So now they are purchasing the coffee to use as an ingredient, and they're going to donate $1 back from each dessert back to Cure. So there are tons of creative ways. I don't think I told you this, I've just connected with a gelato company that's going to make an Adelaide's Blend coffee gelato.
I will have some of that, please.
Finding different ways. If there is a restaurant or a hotel or someone that serves coffee that you know, try and see if they will serve Adelaide's Blend. If they will buy it, I will, we don't have them today, but tomorrow we'll have Dana Capra's card from Tradecraft. Go and pick it up, see if you can find anyone who will sell it. It doesn't have to be a huge undertaking to do fundraising, because we all know that every single dollar counts, you know, from the Cures to maybe it's your own epilepsy monitoring unit that needs better equipment at the hospital that you go to. But it is up to our community to get out there and raise that money, because no one else is going to. No one else cares the way that we care.
And no one else is as desperate.
Desperation will fuel us to do some pretty amazing things. Mm-hmm. I could never have imagined being where we are today and the money that we have been able to raise for Cure if we were not as desperate as we are.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Is anybody interested in, and if you want to talk personally with Kelly after this, please, she's very approachable. She is lovely. She's my favorite board member. So,
Kelly, have you seen any resources for a more extended family for epileptic children or children with epilepsy?
What do you?
So
I'm not sure.
grandparent.
Okay, yeah.
There's really nothing for me. My daughter's on all the social media. She gets great comfort from connecting in that community. I haven't really seen anything for me, and I'm watching her suffer. You know, not so much my grandson, because I know he
It's
gets
so-
great medical care, but my daughter's suffers.
Yeah, and you care about your daughter. I've had the exact same conversation with my mom.
oh, that's so.
Yeah, that is because my mom, she gets upset about how things are going with Adelaide, but she's like, I want to make sure that you're okay and you're being taken care of. And my mom doesn't live close to us, but she will jump on a plane whenever we need her. And, you know, she was with us this whole last week. But she wasn't there for Adelaide, she was there for me.
So everything she said about advocating for her daughter, I think goes right back to you too, though, as a mother. You're never not a mother, right? I mean, it's just always going to be your daughter. So you need to get support, but everything she said about do the same for your daughter. She's lucky.
I think you share your daughter's story too in the same way. You know, one thing that my mom does is she's on social media, but she's not super active and she doesn't really know how to use it, and it's kind of embarrassing. But she sends out emails to all of our family and updates them on what's going on very directly and very personally, and so that people can then reach out and try and help and support me, and also so that the family is not reaching out to me all of the time being like, what's going on, how's it going, because that can be really hard personally to always have to be answering those questions about what's going on. Having to regurgitate over and over that things aren't good is really, really hard. So having my mom there to do that for me is really helpful, and to sort of be the gatekeeper is very beneficial. But that's actually really an interesting concept, and you have my gears turning in my head right now. I'm going to put my mom to work.
Yes.
Creating a grandparents network of caregiving for their children who are, because I don't think that exists. My mom has a new job in retirement.
Right? Well, I'm thinking your mom should be here talking too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Thank you for saying that. My grandma's right here. And I'm looking at her and she's just like, you know, she's gonna cry right now. But, as a mother, my son is 18 years old. And now he's an adult. And I feel very and then I've had to make some concern so that they continue to talk to me about his medication. Because we've done it as a group. It's like I hand over all my mother instincts and all of my wisdom, and I say, okay, I don't count no more. He has to make all those decisions. I think that's fair. And it took me months to get concerned. And then I still only got a year conservatorship. I think it is. I just want to concentrate needs of parents with children with epilepsy to be more parents. It's like it needs to be a transition to hand over this matter.
I think that's because we talk about, like, you have the early intervention programs and transitioning them into school, but there's no transitioning into adulthood and managing. Well, we as a society do a really poor job of transitioning neurotypical children into adulthood. No one teaches anyone how to pay rent or manage checkbooks anymore or any of that. So we societally suck at all of that. But when you're dealing with something as complex as medical care, I would probably try and go to your legislator and find out what programs are out there and push for a program in your community and let them know that this is a problem. Because the early intervention programs, EIP, all of that is through the government. So I would say that you need to go and talk to your local representatives, talk to your mayor, talk to the governor, and let them know that this is an issue and you need programs.
And if it's not there, then start it. If you're not getting, and I know that sounds like it's a lot of work sometimes, but I think the best satisfaction in life is when you're experiencing a travesty like they are, and instead of sitting home and crying, you're like, you know what, I need to fix it.
And you're not dealing with this exclusively. I can only imagine how many parents out there are also battling this exact
In this room
same,
right now.
right?
I'm a special ed teacher.
Yeah.
So you know the system.
I know.
Can you imagine?
The system, and I know how transition is taught through education. There's nothing through them. I look, and because I could have added on this IEP one, but I'm gonna have a teacher teach them how to manage. That just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make any
I
sense. It doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't exist. And then we go through the UCLA, and they're trying to put together more of a holistic view of the child and teaching them how to be more independent in their self-care, the pediatric.
Yeah.
But it's brand new, and I'm already, we're 18 already.
Yeah.
So it's happening now. So you
So
need
it's
it.
happening
Yeah.
now, and other than what I've been teaching in this business, he's about 11 years old and started having seizures. What I thought was most important was the initiative of this podcast.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Wow.